We have established a quorum of 10 members. I invite you to stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I haven't received any notices before this meeting, and at this time, during this period of notifications for this meeting, I just want to, again, on behalf of the Parliament of St. Martin, extend condolences to the family members of those who we have lost, persons who have passed away. And at this time, I wish to call to mind the family, friends, and colleagues in her work of the late Miss Ruby Butte. As we mourn her lossing as a cultural icon of St. Martin, we are grateful for all that she has done and shared in preserving St. Martin's culture and passing on that knowledge to the young ones amongst us. At this time, I also want to stand still for a moment and recognize the important issue of mental health on St. Martin. Mental health is a very global issue in terms of its effects on populations throughout the world, and St. Martin is no exception. As we look at the issue of health in general and mental health in particular, I wish to also express condolences to the families and friends of persons who, during the last months, weeks, and again, have taken their own life. And so this Parliament has already on numerous occasions expressed our concerns and our priority where the mental health of our population is concerned, and we will continue to do so as government strives to deal with the issues of mental health and securing the care for mental health patients here on St. Martin. I continue and I ask if there's anyone who wish to make use of the possibility for notifications at this time. I don't see that being necessary right now, so we can continue with the agenda point for this public meeting, and that is the examination of credentials and admission of members of Parliament. A brief introduction to this particular agenda point. On November the 6th, Wednesday, Parliament received letters from the members of Parliament, Dr. Luc Mercelina, Mrs. Grisha Heiliger-Martin, Ms. Melissa Gums, Mr. Richnel Brugh, tendering their resignations as members of Parliament effective November 26, 2024, in connection with their appointment as ministers in the new Council of Ministers. These letters are registered under ISAs 245, 246, 247, and 248 of this parliamentary year. These letters of resignation, in accordance with Article 49 of the Constitution and Article 120 of the Electoral Ordinance, were submitted to my person. And the resignation of the four persons mentioned, the four MPs mentioned, has made available 4 seats in Parliament for the next 4 elected candidates in line for the respective seats to be sworn in. It is important to note that Article 115 of the Electoral Ordinance states that if, other than in the determination of the results of an election, an existing or upcoming vacant seat must be filled, the chairlady of the voting bureau shall declare within 8 days of being informed of this in a decision stating the reasons that a candidate who appears on the same list as the member whose seat has or will become vacant and who is placed highest on that list in the order referred to in Article 100 is elected. In accordance with Article 120 of the Electoral Ordinance, the President of Parliament notified the Chairlady of the Central Voting Bureau and government of the resignations. On November 12, 2024, Parliament received a letter from the Chairlady of the Central Voting Bureau informing Parliament that Mrs. Veronica C. Janssen-Webster, Mr. Dimar C. Labega, Mr. Rayon A. Peterson, and Mr. Christopher L. Waver accepted their election as members of Parliament. And this document is registered under number 268 of this parliamentary year. It is important to note here that in the decree regarding the resignation of MP Heiliger Martin and the decision that Mr. Dimar Labega is elected to the Parliament of St. Martin, the Voting Bureau considers that Ms. Marinka Gums would be next in line for election to Parliament, but that by letter of November 11, 2024, Ms. Gums indicated that she wishes not to accept the election. So on November 12th of 2024, we also received the credentials from the 4 elected members of Parliament, namely Mrs. Janssen-Webster, Mr. Labega, Mr. Peterson, and Mr. Waver, accompanied by a letter indicating whether or not they have a public function. In addition to that, the elected members of Parliament submitted a letter indicating that they have not acted in contravention with the National Ordinance Registration and Finances of Political Parties. These documents are registered under 264, 265, 266, and 267 of this parliamentary year. Mrs. Veronica Janssen, Mr. Labega, Mr. Waver also submitted an extract from the census office seeing that they have not been a member of Parliament before. These documents are all prescribed by Articles 115, 105, paragraph 4, 104, 107, paragraphs 1 and 2 of the Election Ordinance, and Article 53 of the National Ordinance Registration and Finances of Political Parties. Other articles of law which are also applicable are Article 54 of the Constitution, Article 108 of the Election Ordinance, and Article 2 of the Rules of Order. And this, I would like to say what those are. Each newly elected member of Parliament provide proof of his election by submitting to Parliament the documents prescribed by law constituting his credential. Article 3 of our Rules of Order state, Parliament appoints a committee of 3 members which has the task to verify the credentials of the members of Parliament. The first appointed committee member shall be the President. The committee reports in writing or verbally after having verified the credentials, the other documents as required, and those received pertaining to the election. The credentials and the documents related to them will be made available for perusal by the members of Parliament at the Secretariat of the Clerk. Before going over to appointing the members of the committee to verify the credentials, I want to ask if any member of Parliament sees the need to speak at this time. That is not the case from our speakers list. So we can go over to the appointment of the committee. And in doing so, I would like to appoint MP Franklin Myers, MP La Cruz, and MP Roseberg. I will now ask the clerk to hand over the credentials and pertaining documents to the committee so these can be verified by the committee. As a note, remember, this meeting is not adjourned while the committee verifies the credentials of the elected members of Parliament. The committee members are now approaching the desk to receive all of the necessary information, which constitute the credentials, and according to law, as I mentioned during the introduction, what documents are necessary in order for the credentials of incoming members of parliament to be vetted and reported upon to the Parliament of St. Martin. This is a necessary procedure in order for incoming members of parliament to take the oath of office before they can assume their duties as member of parliament. At this time, the committee is reviewing the documents of the members or incoming members of parliament. I now give the floor to the chairman of the committee, MP Franklin Myers. MP Chairman, you have the floor.
Morning, Madam Chair. I am happy to announce that all of the credentials for the candidates are in place, namely Mr. Christopher Waver, Mr. Dimar Labega, Mr. Rayon Peterson, and Mrs. Veronica Janssen Webster.
Thank you so much, Chairperson of the committee, approving or scrutinizing the credentials of the incoming members of Parliament. To the other committee members, I thank you all for a job well done. Thank you for taking up that task. You are also hereby discharged of your duties. Thank you so much. Thank you, committee members. Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, the committee to examine the credentials has approved these credentials of the following persons: Mrs. Veronica C. Janssen Webster, Mr. Dimar C. Labega, Mr. Rayon A. Peterson, and Mr. Christopher L. Waver. Does Parliament agree with the proposal of the approval of the credentials? Not hearing anything to the contrary, Parliament has agreed to approve the credentials of Mrs. Janssen Webster, Mr. Labega, Mr. Peterson, and Mr. Waver. And I will now, according to Article 122, Paragraph 1, subletters A, B, and C of the Election Ordinance, notify immediately the Governor, the Chair Lady of the Central Voting Bureau, and the persons admitted regarding their admittance to Parliament. I want to congratulate the 4 members just mentioned on their admittance as members of the Parliament of St. Martin. As soon as these incoming members are sworn in by the Governor, they will take their place in Parliament as members of the Parliament of St. Martin. Congratulations to the incoming members of Parliament whose credentials have just been approved by this Parliament. Thank you, members of Parliament. Congratulations once again. And I hereby would close this meeting, but not before reminding the admitted members that they would have to submit a request to the Governor to administer the oath or declaration and affirmation as prescribed by law. Ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament, we have come to the end of this meeting. I want to thank you all for your participation, extending congratulations once again to the 4 members elected to the Parliament of St. Martin and their families. And I hereby close this meeting. Meeting closed.